Good morning, Mr. Dick.
Good morning.
You're going to be asked questions by Miss Graham, who's sitting at the end of the table. Before that happens, will you say the words of the affirmation after me? I solemnly, sincerely and truly
I solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that
I will tell the truth,
I will tell the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Miss Graham.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Dick.
Good morning.
You are Martyn Dick,
Yes,
and would you tell us what age you are?
37.
We have all of your contact details, so I don't need you to say those out loud. And can I just explain to you what's in front of you at the moment? You see that blue folder there?
Yep.
Have a look in that. Now, that should contain some hard copies of the inquiry statement that you've given us, and also a couple of earlier statements that you gave.
Okay.
If you want to look at those hard copies at any time, that is for your disposal and you should just use them.
No problem.
But in addition, if I'm going to ask you about a particular paragraph in one of your statements, you see the screen in front of you, it's going to come up there. If you think there's another bit in the statement you'd rather look at, you can let me know and we'll try and get that on the screen as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. First of all, before I go into your individual statements, so that everybody here knows who you are, we've heard that you were a friend of Sheku Bayo
Yes.
and you'd spent some time with him in the early hours of the morning, the Sunday morning on the 3rd of May 2015.
Yes.
And that's why you're here, to help us understand some of that information. And I think in the early hours of the Sunday, you'd been watching some boxing
Yep.
with him and Zaid Saeed.
Yes.
Thank you. And at that time, you were living in a property in Kirkcaldy, or near to Kirkcaldy, with your then partner, Kirsty MacLeod.
Yes.
And she's now your wife.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you. Let's look at those statements then, if I may. The first is a statement that I think you gave to Police Scotland on the 3rd of May 2015, and that it has a special number, PERC 00030. So you'll see that now as it's come up on the screen in front of you as well. And if we see your name, as we go down, you see this statement was taken, and it says 3rd of May 2015 at 13:45, and it was taken at Kirkcaldy Police Station by two officers, DC Forbes and DC O'Neill. Do you see that?
Yep.
And do you remember giving the police that statement
Yes.
that day? And then if we can just look at the next, we don't need to go through that anymore, thank you. And we'll go look at the next statement that we've got, which is PERC 00031. And this should be another statement that was given by you, and you'll see this was a slightly later date of the 8th of May 2015. See that towards the bottom of the screen? At 11:25. And that was taken at your address by DCI Brian Dodd. Do you remember giving that
That
at
was
your
the
address?
PERC, yeah.
And that was PERC.
Yes.
And can I ask you now to look at your inquiry statement? And this is the statement that has been taken by the inquiry, and was taken on the 29th of November last year. And it's 14 pages. And if we look at the final page, we see that it was signed by you on the 6th of January this year. Now, on the screen, your signatures have been redacted so they can't be seen. But on the hard copy that you've got in front of you, can you confirm that you signed every page of your inquiry statement?
Yeah.
And you'll see on the screen in the final paragraph of your statement, number 78, you believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website. And you understand that that's the case.
Yes.
This will be published after you've given evidence today.
Yep.
Thank you. And when you gave your inquiry statement, and I fully appreciate the events we're talking about happened in 2015, so almost 8 years ago now. But when you gave your statement to the inquiry team, were you doing your best to give a true and accurate
Yes, yes, of course.
record? Thank you. And you've said, if we can look back, please, at paragraphs 3 and 5, if we could have both of those on the screen. Here we are. Now, you say here, this is in your inquiry statement, you definitely remember the police interview. Was that the first
On the 3rd
one
of May,
on the
yes.
3rd of May?
Yeah.
And you remember the Perk interview, that was the one on the 8th of May, but that was a little less memorable.
Yeah.
And we'll go into this in detail shortly. And you've said at paragraph 4, I told Perk the truth and I gave them an accurate account to the best of my memory. And then at 5, you say, I told police the truth, I gave them an accurate account, naively, I would say, under false pretenses. I have no reason to lie and I was as honest as possible. And so in relation to your earlier statements to the police and to Perk, you were being truthful and doing your best to be accurate.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. And then can we look at paragraph 6, please? You've said, my memory is probably patchy in bits, but I remember the pertinent information. And do you want to say a little bit more about that? To what extent is your memory a little bit patchy now?
Just with the amount of time that's passed, obviously it's hard to remember details that were memorable once, and so much time's passed now, it's, you know, they've faded a little bit. But I feel like I remember like I said, I feel like I remember the important information.
Thank you. And you'll do your best today to remember?
Yes, certainly, yeah.
Thank you. Before we look at the 3rd of May, you'll see that you've been asked about that date in 2015, and I'm going to come on to that. But could you help the chair understand a little bit about how you knew Shekubayo and how often you saw him, the nature of your friendship?
I think we met in 2009 or 10. We were both single at the time, so we had plenty of time to spend together. We would, you know, just go to the gym together a lot. For a good few years, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, we were very, very close friends, probably spoke most days. He was like my go-to friend that I would do, you know, spend time with at the weekend and so on. Yeah.
A good friendship.
Yeah, very close friendship.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to the 3rd of May 2015, and you'll see in paragraph 7, you talk about living with Kirsty, your now wife, and you say there you got up, this is on the Sunday, between 12 and 12:30 on that date. And you say you'd had texts or missed calls from Zaid Sahid, and it was clear something had happened with our friend Shekubayo, but we didn't know what it was. So when you got up that day, did you have any idea what had gone wrong or what had happened?
No idea. Obviously, Shek wasn't his normal self when I'd last seen him, when we'd parted company. But it was just clear that something had happened. We had missed calls. I can't remember. Whatever's in the earlier statements will be completely accurate because I could remember it then. But we'd had a text from somewhere. I feel like it was somewhere between 12 and 1. I'm not sure how accurate between 12 and 12:30 is. It's approximately. And we had a text from Zahid saying something to the effect of, I'm with the police, I think they're coming to yours, I don't know what's going on, something like that. I might not be exact, but it was along those lines. Yeah.
And how long after you'd had that text message from Zayed did the police arrive?
In my memory, it was very quickly. We went downstairs. I don't know if we'd woke up and got that text or if we'd went downstairs first. I can't remember. But we were just, my wife and I, Kirsty, we were in the kitchen having a coffee, and the police, we saw them out our kitchen window, the cars start coming around the corner. It felt like no more than 15 minutes. It was very quick.
How many cars did you see arrive?
I can't remember how many cars. I know there was 9, 10 officers, some in uniform, some in suits, and they all came into the house.
As we look at paragraph 8 on the screen of your statement, you say the police arrived. I think there were 9 officers. There were uniformed officers and plainclothes officers in suits. They all came into our house. Only one of them spoke. It was extremely intimidating. We just knew from Zahid that something happened, and then all these officers piled into our house and stood around. They said something happened, and were asking for our help with information. Did all of those officers come into your house?
Yes, like I said, I think there was 9 in the house. There was 2 stationed outside, but I can't remember if that was after the fact, and maybe those 2 also came in initially. I can't remember. But yeah, they all came into the house. Sorry.
No, sorry. Do you remember who did the talking? Did they introduce themselves?
No, I'm sure it was one of the officers that took my statement. There was 2 in the room with me when I gave my statement, and I'm sure one of them was the one that spoke to us when they came in.
So you gave your statement on the 3rd of May to a DC Forbes and a DC O'Neill.
Yeah, I think it was one of them.
Right.
I'm not 100%, but I think it was.
Okay. When the officers came into your house, describe where they went and what they did.
I feel like we went into the living room. The back door was in the kitchen, so they came in that way, and then we went through to the living room. Like I said, I only remember him speaking to us, and he said something had happened and they don't know what it is and they need our help with it, and that's what they said. Like, looking back now, I think they could have maybe given us a little bit more understanding of what was going on, rather than just having all these people in our house at once, which was intimidating, as you can imagine. Obviously we agreed to go. It didn't feel like there was much. It didn't feel like it was an option to refuse. Plus, they said they needed help. Obviously, we had nothing to hide. We thought, well, we'll help. We'll do as they ask. We've no reason not to. So I went up. I wanted to get changed. An officer was sent upstairs with me as I got changed, and I was asked to leave my clothes that I'd been wearing the night before. I was asked to leave them out. And same with Kirsty. And then we were separated and taken in separate cars to the police station.
I'm going to go through that in a little more detail,
Sure.
if that's okay. You said the officers came in and said something had happened. Did they give you an explanation as to what had happened?
No, I clearly remember being told something has happened involving Sheikh. We don't know what it is, but we need your help. We need information from you if you'll come and speak to us. So obviously, we agreed to.
What was going through your mind when all of these officers arrived and came in and said something had happened?
Just, I don't know, really shocked, to be honest. It was all just happening all of a sudden. Really had no idea, a lot of confusion, just very confused.
Did you say anything to the officers, or did Kirsty say anything or ask questions?
No, I don't remember. Honestly, we just went with what they were asking us to do and just went with them, did what we were asked.
Did the officers indicate in any way that they had a warrant?
No, no.
Did they ask for your consent and your permission to come into the house?
No. I mean, I don't recall. I don't think so.
Describe the demeanour and the manner of the officers. You've described it as, in your statement, as extremely intimidating in paragraph 8. Can you help the chair understand a little bit more about how they were acting that day?
Well, like I said, as I recall, they were all just in the house. One of the officers, the guy I spoke to, I can remember sitting on the couch. I maybe sat across from him. I can't even remember that, to be honest. I know we were in the living room and the other officers were just standing. Just everybody looked very serious. Nobody was saying anything. Everybody was just standing in the house. He said what he said. As I said, that's all I can recall him saying, is that something had happened and they don't know what it was. So it was clear to us that something serious was going on. We had no idea what, and that was the intimidating part, I guess.
And of all the people who were there that day in your house, how many were sitting?
If anyone, I only recall sitting with the person I spoke to, the officer.
Right.
O'Neill, maybe, if it was one of them, I think. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Can we look at some later paragraphs in your inquiry statement, 49, 50 and 51? We probably won't get all three of them on the screen. Let's see. We'll start with 14. Oh, we can. 49. This is where the inquiry team have asked you to comment on a statement by a DC David Bellingham. Do you see that at paragraph 49 at the top?
Yeah.
Who has stated to the inquiry, certainly from what I recall initially going in, Martyn and his partner were quite content for us being there and were quite happy for us being in the house. I don't recall if any searching got done at that stage, and then they left and we secured the house. And at paragraph 50, you say we definitely weren't happy for them to be there. Looking back, we were intimidated and we wouldn't have thought of putting up an argument. We were worried of what was going on. We were eager to help them. That was the circumstance, thinking we were going to give them information with whatever it was. I don't recall them looking about the house. They just piled in, and then most of them there. One officer, must have been MIT, said about the police station. I'd like to ask you about this comment by DC Bellingham. So
Yeah.
we've not heard yet from DC Bellingham,
Mm-hmm.
but from this statement, which is to the inquiry, he talks about you being quite content and quite happy. And that doesn't seem to be quite the description that you're giving.
No.
And I just wondered, you say there you weren't happy about...
Well, no. Benefit of the doubt, he's maybe just chosen his words wrong, and that we weren't putting up a fight or arguing about it. It's obviously a stretch to say. I mean, nobody would be happy that they were in there. It was a Sunday. We weren't wanting to be in that situation. We were shocked, I'm sure they would expect anyone to be in that situation. I don't know how you would expect any different. We weren't happy and content, but we were completely shocked and wondering what was going on and just doing what we were asked to do.
And in that mindset, did you say anything to the police to indicate that you were intimidated or
No.
you weren't happy?
No.
Did Kirsty?
No, we were eager to help. they said they needed our help. Something serious had happened. Something serious was going on. Something like that. So we were happy to help them.
We also have a sight of another earlier statement by DC Bellingham, where he indicates that the nature of the police inquiry was explained to you. Do you feel you had an explanation as to...
No.
You've already told us that limited information was given.
Yeah, very, very limited. That's the extent of it.
Right. If we look at paragraph 9 of your inquiry statement, so we can go back up the page, please. You say, I don't think they explained the nature of why they were there. They said something had happened involving Sheck and they don't know what it is yet and they needed information. They definitely didn't say what had happened. No specific details were given, just something had happened. Did any of the officers give you an explanation as to why they thought you could help, provide them with more information?
No. I think I'd assumed, obviously, I knew they'd spoke to Zahid at this point, or they were with Zahid because he'd been in touch with us. So I assumed they'd possibly got the information from him that Sheck was at our house the night before.
And at that point of the day, did you know that by then Sheck had actually died?
No.
At any point when they were in the house, did the police share any of that information with you?
Nothing.
You've mentioned a moment ago that an officer came upstairs. Could we look at paragraph 10, please? And you say we were both allowed to change. One uniformed officer came upstairs with me while I got changed. For what reason, I don't know. We were treated in a strange way, considering we hadn't committed a crime. It was strange for him to come upstairs with me while I got changed. He stood outside the door while I changed. They asked me to leave the clothes from the night before on the bed, so I did that. It was my work clothes that I'd had on the night before. I think I just had them lying around and I left them on the bed. So we could look at the start of that paragraph, please. You say there, we were both allowed to change. I take it that's a reference to you and Kirsty.
Yes.
Why do you use the word allowed? Allowed to change? I mean, you're in your own house, so can you explain why you use that?
I mean, I guess it's just the fact that at this point, with them all being in our home, it feels like we were sort of they were directing us in what we were to do, and the fact that an officer was to come up and stand. He stood outside my room, not inside the room, but still, it strikes me as strange, especially in hindsight now. It seems like we were probably a bit naive and not questioning things more, but obviously at the time it was just complete shock and confusion. We had no idea what was going on. Yeah, I guess that's why I used that word.
I mean, looking back now, Mr. Dick, can you think of any reason why the police would act in that way towards you on that particular day?
I mean, it's hard to say. It feels like they were you know, I don't know. It's hard to say. Certainly, it feels like they could have come in and explained things more clearly to us and made it clear to us that we hadn't done anything wrong for us, obviously. But instead, it was sort of, you know, it was a scary situation because they had all come in and it was as if we had done something wrong, and with the officer coming up and standing with us, it seemed as if we might be in some kind of trouble or something like that. I don't know, it seems like they were trying to, I don't know, control the information that was going to be coming out next. That, you know.
At any time did the police disabuse you of the idea or the impression that you'd done something wrong?
No, I don't remember that, no.
Did the police act in any way that was what you might call reassuring towards you?
No.
So you've said that an officer came with you and stood outside your door. Stood outside your bedroom door?
Yeah.
Was that upstairs?
Yeah.
What was happening with Kirsty at that time?
I can't remember. I feel like she went up and got changed just after me. I think she was downstairs with them at that point in time, I think.
Did you understand why they wanted your clothes?
No.
Was any explanation given about that?
No, I just agreed because all that was going through my head at the time was, well, I'm going to just be completely honest and open with them. I've got nothing to hide. There's no reason I shouldn't leave them my clothes, so I'll just do as they ask.
Did you feel at that time that you had the opportunity to say no to the requests that were being made?
Looking back, I guess I could have. It didn't really occur to me at the time that would be the right thing to do. Just the confusion of the whole situation really played a part in that, I guess. Not knowing what to do or say.
Did the police indicate in any way that it was open to you to say, no, I don't want to get changed, or I don't want to give you my clothes?
That option wasn't given. I could have maybe, again, looking back, I'm sure we could have refused. I don't know what they could have done about that, but we didn't see any reason to.
How long had passed in terms of time between the officers arriving at your door and you going upstairs and getting changed?
Just minutes. A few minutes, 5 minutes maybe at the most.
Okay. Did you understand when you're in your bedroom, you've described the officer standing at the door outside.
Mm-hmm.
Did you understand why he was standing outside
No.
your bedroom door?
No. I still don't.
Have you ever been given any explanation from the police? Can we look at paragraph 54 of your inquiry statement, please? You've been referred here by the inquiry team to Kirsty's account. Let me just read that out, please. Kirsty said at 1:07 p.m. I just got out of my bed. Martyn was also in the house at that time. Martyn answered the door and let the officers in. There were 2 uniformed policemen and about 6 to 8 plainclothes officers wearing suits. Initially, I was in the kitchen, and then I came into the living room where Martyn was talking to the police. Do you remember? Does that sound familiar to you? Do you think that's correct?
Kirsty might be remembering it slightly better than me. I mean, it's roughly I can't remember the details of it, to be honest, specifically. That could be correct.
Would you disagree with anything that Kirsty said there?
No.
Okay. And then can we look at paragraph 56, please? And Kirsty later says, the CID officer said, we need your house. And they wanted us to go down to the police station at Kirkcaldy to talk to them. At that point, I agreed to go to the police station, and we were asked to hand over a set of keys for the house. The CID didn't ask permission to do anything, but neither Martyn or me really challenged them about it. We just did what they asked us to do. They did not explain why they were taking control of our house or what they were going to do with it. Again, neither Martyn or me asked them any of these questions either. So that was Kirsty's statement, which has been referred to there. Looking at that, do you disagree or agree with anything that's said in there?
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. So, and I think at paragraph 57 you say, that sounds right to me. And I don't remember that specifically, but it sounds like what I remember. We need your house. The fine details I can't remember, but if that's what Kirsty said, then that's what would have happened. I don't remember being given a choice. We said, can we get in for dog food? And they said yes, but that changed. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're saying there about the dog food?
Yeah, well, our dog was not in the house that night. He was staying at Kirsty's mum's house. So they'd said they were going to be taking our house, and they needed our keys. And we'd asked, will we be able to get in later on? Specifically, we'll need dog food. If we're not allowed to stay in our house tonight, we're going to need food for the dog. And they'd said that would be no problem. But later on, we were told, I guess after we got out of the police station, we were told we couldn't get access to the house.
So when you left the house that day, did the police give you an indication that you might have to stay away overnight?
I honestly can't remember. I really can't remember if that was indicated then or not. I really can't remember.
Were you able during that day to get back in to
No.
get dog food at all?
No.
What happened to the dog? Did the dog remain at Kirsty's mum's?
Yeah, which is where we also went to stay after we'd been in the police station. Yeah, I don't remember at what point. When they said they were seizing our house before we went to the police station, I can't recall what they indicated about how long they would be there. The only thing I remember is they'd said we'd be able to get access later on if we needed something, anything, and then we weren't. But I can't remember exactly how it was worded to us.
Right. Can we look at paragraph 58, please? Just go slightly further down, thank you. Again, this is still Kirsty, your wife's statement. At this time, I was still wearing the clothes I had on when Shek was in the house. I asked if I could go and get changed, and before I went upstairs, they told me to leave out the clothes I had been wearing. They explained this by saying they might have to rule out my DNA from Shek, as I had earlier told them that I had cuddled Shek when he arrived at the house that morning. Martyn went upstairs to our bedroom to get changed. One of the CID officers went with him and stood outside the door. I got changed in the bathroom, and I think there was another officer standing out on the upstairs landing as well. Once I got changed, I was asked to leave my clothes on the ironing board in the kitchen, which I did. I'm not sure what Martyn did with his clothes. So you told us earlier that Kirsty also got changed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember being given any explanation about ruling out DNA?
I don't know.
No. So that was not part of an explanation given
No,
to you by
no,
the police?
no.
And she says, I got changed in the bathroom, and I think there was another officer standing out on the upstairs landing as well. Is the bathroom, access to the bathroom via the upstairs landing?
Yes.
And do you remember whether you saw another officer outside the bathroom door?
There was definitely an officer that went up with her as well to sort of stand outside the door.
And then she says that she left her clothes on the ironing board in the kitchen, which you've told us was downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do with your clothes?
I think I left them on the bed. I can't remember for certain, to be honest. I think I left them on the bed.
And what did the officer outside your bedroom door do? Do you remember after you left your clothes there?
I don't remember, no. I just went downstairs and then we left pretty shortly after that. Do
you remember now whether you were ever given an explanation about what they were going to do with your clothes or why they wanted your clothes?
No.
Can I go back to asking about the point you left the house, after you left the house? Could we go back to paragraph 11, please? And you say there, when we left, they stayed at the house. Some of them, maybe two, were stationed at our house. That's where they were going to be. They put police tape round our house. I don't recall getting told anything about what was happening with my house. Looking back now, maybe we would want some more answers. It was intimidating having them all coming to the house, standing there and talking to us. It feels like we're involved in something big, significant and important. Looking back now, Mr. Dick, what answers would you have liked? What explanation would you have liked at that time?
An explanation as to what had happened, why they wanted to speak to us. Obviously, they had a lot more information at this point by midday, but they shared nothing with us. Maybe they were worried, maybe they thought if they'd given us more information we would have refused to speak to them and that would then affect something, I don't know. Yeah, just more of an explanation and less, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but less intimidation, to be honest, which is really what it felt like. That's the memorable feeling of that morning.
Looking back now, what would have helped you in relation to the house and the arrangements for the house and access to the house? What type of thing would you have liked to have known at that time about your house and getting access to the house?
About
would it have helped you to know when you could get back into the house, or?
Yeah, or why they needed to be there. Ultimately, yeah, why they needed to be there.
Did the police ever speak to you about getting your consent to seize the house or seeking a warrant for the house?
No, I don't recall that at all.
Did they give you any explanation why they were surrounding your house with tape, police tape?
No, I can't remember if that was done. We may have become aware of that after, after we'd come out of the police station. Maybe one of our friends told us. I can't remember if they were doing that when we were still there or as we left or anything. I assume that happened after.
Can we look at paragraph 15, please? You say, I don't feel like I was given a choice whether the house was seized or not. I didn't get a chance to say no to that. Is that how you felt at the time?
Yeah, but again, at the time, we weren't thinking of saying no, we were just cooperating. We weren't really questioning. There was nothing to question at the time. We had no information whatsoever, so we were just cooperating as much as we could.
Did you understand that you could have said no to the police in relation to them seizing the house?
Only in hindsight, after the fact. Didn't really think about it at the time.
How close was your house to Hayfield Road?
Maybe 20-minute walk, something like that.
Thank you.
A couple of miles.
At paragraph 16, you say they then separated us, I think that's you and Kirsty,
Yeah.
and took us in separate cars to the police station. They took us to the police station separately and then into a room to give a statement. They said they didn't know what happened, but it was something involving Sheck. Looking back now, I feel like I was completely naive. They said they wanted my help and I had no reason not to or be dishonest, so I helped. They took me to a room to give my statement. They wanted everything I could remember up to the point we were at. I was there for about 6 hours giving the most detailed and complete statement I could. So you and Kirsty were taken separately to the station
Yes.
and kept in separate rooms.
Yeah.
And you said you spent around 6 hours there that day.
Approximately 5 or 6, something like that, as I recall.
Tell us, were you, was it made clear to you you were there on a voluntary basis?
I wouldn't say so, but again, it wasn't questioned. I was looking to cooperate as much as possible, given that what appeared to be the seriousness of the situation. Was just happy to cooperate.
Were you aware that you had the option to say you'd had enough or you wanted to stop?
No, didn't really think about that.
Were you offered breaks and refreshments?
I was given water. I don't think I had a break.
Was that because you didn't want a break or you weren't offered?
I don't remember being offered a break. I probably would have taken it if I was. Maybe. I mean, it was a long time ago. I don't recall being offered a break. It was just all done in one. All done at once. Yeah.
During that period of time, were you given the opportunity to make contact with Kirsty?
No.
Did you know how she was?
No.
Were you given the option to contact anyone else?
No.
Was there anyone there to support you in any way?
No. No.
What information did they give you during that time when you were at the police station? What information did they give you about the circumstances and what happened?
Nothing. To be honest, it was just all me. It was just again, like I said there, I gave the most detailed and complete statement I could. I was just as honest. Given that I knew nothing, this is where I feel like I was naive looking back. Although obviously in that situation you would hope that you were just doing the right thing by cooperating. So that's what I did. What was your question? Sorry, again.
Don't worry. I was going to ask you, during that time you were in the police station, did they tell you that Sheku had died?
No, no.
By the time you finished your statement, were you aware that he'd died?
No. When I finished my statement, I can remember one of the two officers that were there initially, one of them had left earlier. I can't remember exactly when, but he'd had to go for some reason, so it was just myself and the guy writing the statement. After I'd given my statement, he'd left at some point, and another police officer had come in, maybe just to sit with me, I don't know. And I'd said to him, I don't even know what's going on. And he said, oh, do you know? Like that sort of thing. Oh, do you not? And that was it. He didn't tell me anything. And it was after that I went outside, and Kirsty was already out there, and she broke it to me, what had happened. That she said that I said to her, I don't know what's going on, and she said something to the effect of, I don't know either. I do know that Shek's no longer with us.
And it was Kirsty that broke it to you?
Yes, outside the police station.
And was that the first you'd heard?
Yeah.
Can I ask you about some paragraphs in your statement? First of all, let's look at paragraph 5. I told police the truth. I gave them an accurate account. Naively, I would say, under false pretenses. I've no reason to lie, and I was as honest as possible. And then I'd like to look at paragraphs 17 and 18, where that phrase appears again. I would say it was under false pretenses. We were manipulated to giving information that wasn't necessary, as it turns out. None of it matters to what happened. And then at 18, I don't remember giving them information in the house at the time. They told us there was an incident involving Shek. They needed detailed, I say, false pretenses because they didn't share the information that they clearly had with us. You've made reference in those paragraphs to this phrase, false pretenses. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you could help the chair understand what it is you mean by that.
What feels like just the withholding of information. I feel like they could have shared that the information that they had with us. Obviously, this is in hindsight. It was after the fact that when more and more details began to come out. Then it's looking back that I feel naive for not questioning things more. But again, I didn't. I had no reason to. Yeah, it's just that when I say false pretenses, I mean I was speaking to them with the understanding that I was helping them with something that they didn't have the answers for yet, and so they needed my information for that. But looking back, I'm not sure how much of it, if any of it, was really relevant to his death, to the incident itself. I don't know. There's not, considering I spoke for hours and hours with them, I don't think much of it is very relevant to the incident itself.
And how has it made you feel, looking back now, how do you feel about the fact that there was no information given to you about Sheik having died or the circumstances of that?
That's something that's bothered Kirsty and I since it happened, obviously, and it's one of these situations. I don't know. I feel like we've learned a kind of hard lesson in terms of trusting the police, which we want to, obviously, and obviously in an ideal world we should be able to, but this sort of promotes a kind of distrust in the police, the fact that they withheld this information from us, and yeah, it feels like we were sort of, I don't know, I guess maybe, I don't know, used in some way, manipulated into going along with something that we, sorry, I'm having a hard time articulating it, to be honest.
So what is the long-term impact of your experiences that day? What's the long-term impact been in relation to your levels of trust with Police Scotland?
I guess I feel differently towards it now than I did then. I feel like it's important to have trust in the police, obviously, for everyone. Obviously, we need them. If someone breaks into my house, I need to get in touch with them. I need to speak to them. I want to teach my children that they should trust them and that they can trust them, but it's difficult because I now have clear evidence that they can't always be trusted because of what's happened after the fact, all the ridiculous stories that came out, all the lies that they told to Sheik's family, things like that. It's quite hard to get your head around, actually, that's the police that are putting out these stories, and it doesn't seem right that I would expect better, as everyone should, from the police.
Thank you. And do you still have contact with Sheik Ubayo's family?
No, I've not spoke to them in a while.
All right. Can I go back to paragraph 18?
Yes.
Just to finish looking at that paragraph. You say, looking back, had I had all the information then, maybe things would have been different. I would have been completely honest with them anyway, but maybe I would have had more of an angle on what was relevant information to give them. I gave them a lot of information that wasn't relevant at all. Looking back, it feels like they were gathering information to deflect from themselves. That's how it feels now. So here you're looking back, and if you'd had more information then, maybe things would have been different. And I'd like to explore to what extent that would have changed things and made a difference at the time. You talk first of all about relevant information.
It's hard to say, to put myself in a situation where I would have had all the information at that moment in time, because all the information came out piece by piece in the days, weeks, months after the incident itself. I mean, if I'd known then what I know now, I wouldn't have, I probably would have been much more curious to know if they were being questioned, and maybe even why I was being questioned at all, to be honest, if I had more of the information.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
When what did I say?
You said you'd be wondering about where.
Oh, the police officers
being
involved. The police officers involved. I would be curious to know if, I would think they would be the first people that should be spoken to.
So the officers who were at the scene
Yes.
when he.
Yes.
Yeah, during Hayfield Road, as opposed to you spending
Yeah.
6 hours in the police station being questioned.
Yeah.
And was it a question and answer session that you had in the police station?
It was more everything you can remember from this point on.
And then at the end of paragraph 18, you say, looking back, it feels like they were gathering information to deflect from themselves. That's how it feels now. And again, I wonder if you could help the chair understand what you mean by that.
That's just how it feels with everything now.
What did you mean to deflect from themselves?
Well, the police officers are the ones responsible for this situation. Their actions are responsible for what happened. It's clear that Kirsty and I and our house didn't have anything to do with Hayfield Road. Just like all the things that started coming out after the incident, all the stories, which looking back are like seem clear to be media spin in some way and trying to, you know, there's a lot of things slandering Sheck's character and things like that, putting the blame onto him as if he somehow deserved what happened to him. That's what I mean by deflecting it. Like it seemed to be going in every other direction except the actions of the police. You know, it was drugs or terrorism or all these other things rather than a focus on the incident itself and the decisions made by the police. I feel like they've not, like, there can, obviously, they're just humans, and humans make mistakes, and I can get myself to the point of thinking they've made some bad decisions. Mistakes were made, and that everybody makes mistakes, even, you know, people that we don't want to, you know, emergency services and doctors and so on. But it seems like there's no attempt to admit any fault whatsoever, which just doesn't seem right. I mean, I don't know how they learn from things going forward. Obviously, it was a grave mistake, but mistakes were made nonetheless. I feel like that could be more. It's okay to look at the mistakes that were made and bad decisions that were made. Sorry, I can't remember what you asked me of.
That's my questions don't matter.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I ask you to look at paragraph 21, please? You've touched there on, they were asking about Sheik's character. In this paragraph you say, I'm sure they were asking about Sheik's character, what he was like as a person. I gave a very detailed statement for hours because they said they needed my help. I gave them a detailed statement. The majority of it isn't relevant. Would you be able to help us understand what sort of questions were being asked during the time you were with the police at Kirkcaldy about Sheik's character? Can you give me some examples?
I honestly can't remember. I can't remember that. I can't remember the questions about it, specific questions about his character that were asked on that initial police statement. What I remember is, in the days, weeks after, talking amongst myself, Zahid and Kirsty and others, in talking about it with others, that's what we sort of came to the conclusion, that they were asking about his character to find faults and maybe things that could be used as a mechanism to put more blame onto him in some way, and to show that their actions were necessary.
So they were asking questions to find faults with Sheku?
I can't remember the questions about his character that they were asking in that initial police interview. I'm sure they asked questions I'm sure they did. I can't remember what they were. I really can't remember.
But you've talked about discussing it with Zaid and Kirsty. What was your impression about the reasons you'd been asked those questions in the days after?
Just that, and it all came from the discussions that we were having amongst us and what we thought was going on, and I guess informed by the other stories and things that were coming out, we were sort of piecing together a understanding of what was going on, and I guess we felt like that was the situation, that they were trying to dig into his character more to, I don't know, I guess find fault. That was what we were thinking at the time. But like I said, I can't remember the specific questions. I'm sure I just got asked what he was like as a person. Was he ever aggressive? He was a friendly person? Was he ever aggressive? But again, I can't remember specifically. So.
And looking back now, has your impression changed in relation to that?
No.
Can I ask you to look at paragraph 23, please? You see, I believe I did give a DNA sample. I think they asked us to give a DNA sample. I'm sure I got my mouth swabbed. I can't remember any other parts to it. They asked us to do it, so we did it naively. Tell me, when were you asked to give a DNA sample?
When I was in the room where I was to give my statement.
So that's in Kirkcaldy Police Office?
Yeah.
During the hours you spent giving your statement?
Yes, before the statement, as I recall.
Yes. After you arrived there?
Yeah,
before the statement? And was an explanation given to you by the police at that point as to why they were looking for a DNA sample from you?
No, I just went along with it.
Were you asked to provide that on a voluntary basis?
I don't remember, I just remember getting my mouth swabbed. They said it was for a DNA sample. Again, didn't question anything.
I mean, you say in paragraph 24 that you consented to this in the sense that you opened your mouth and let them do it. They didn't give us any information, and I didn't know what was going on. In my head, I'm thinking I've got no reason to lie or be cagey, and as far as I know, I've not done anything wrong. They said they needed the swab, and so I said they can have it and I'm willing to help. And really that's the mindset that you've been describing for us.
Yes, just fully cooperative.
Yeah. Thinking back to your experiences in your house and in Kirkcaldy Police Station, and thinking about the way the police handled it and how you felt that day, could you maybe think and help the chair understand, is there a way that it could have been done better? From your own perspective, could they have made the situation a more positive one if that was possible?
Yeah, I mean, far be it from me to say the way things should be done, but obviously they could have given us more information, and understanding that he wasn't even with us any longer. More of a reassurance that we hadn't done anything, an explanation as to why we were given information, what was relevant about it. But again, you know, they could have been speaking to the police officers involved at this time. That could have been happening instead, immediately afterwards. I feel like that would have been a better use of time.
When you say the police officers, do you mean the ones who were involved at Hayfield Road?
Yep.
When you were finished giving your statement in Kirkcaldy Police Office and leaving, did you receive any information at that stage about the house or when you could get access to the house?
Only that we couldn't get access on that night. I think I'd wanted to get my keys for the car or van, I can't remember what I was driving at the time, so that we could drive through to Kirsty's mum's house, but we were told we would be getting driven through it. We couldn't get to the house because the car keys were in the house, or I can't remember if, well, the car was at the house anyway, and we were just driven through to Kirsty's mum's.
So someone from the police drove you through to where you were going to stay that night?
Yeah, we weren't allowed to go to our house.
To back home. Can we look at paragraph 27, please? You say here that you were supposed to be working that night, and you sent a text explaining the situation and said you were at the police station, that Sheck had died. Somebody said not to say anything to the police. Looking back now, I know why he said that to me. He was aware that they would possibly use information for their own means. You said that you were supposed to be working.
Mm-hmm.
And did the time you spent in Kirkcaldy, you said it was around 6 hours, did that cause difficulties in relation to your work that night?
I was probably supposed to be starting at 9 o'clock or something, so after I'd given my statement, I was alone in the room at this point. It was probably just after I'd given the statement. No, sorry, it wouldn't have been because I had the information. I guess it would come back in from. I'd come back in from speaking to Kirsty outside. I was back in the same room that I'd gave my statement, and so I texted my boss, and I'd said, there was a very concise message. I just said, Sheik's died or passed away, and I'm at the police station. That was it. That was the text I'd sent to him, and he was ringing me. I just wasn't answering. I wasn't in the mood for talking at that point. I'd given them the information. I wasn't wanting to. I'd just learned that Sheik wasn't here. I wasn't wanting to speak to anyone else about it. So I'd missed all his calls, and then he texted me. He sent me a text saying, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like, "Don't say anything. Tell them you." Something along the lines of not to speak with them without a lawyer, or something along those lines. But it was too late. Obviously, I'd already been speaking to them for hours. But looking back, I guess he knew things that I didn't know. Maybe that's a good way of putting it.
You've said that you finished your statement, you went outside, Kirsty told you about Sheik.
Mm-hmm.
You've now said you went back and you ended up back in the room
Mm-hmm.
where you'd given your statement. What was it that made you go back into Kirkcaldy Police Office?
I think they'd let us out for a break. I mean, I guess as I'm thinking about it now, I can't remember exactly. They'd let us out for a break, and then we'd went back in. I don't remember how long I was back in for, or what, apart from sending the text to my boss, and then my phone, they'd asked for my phone. I can't remember how long I was back in the police station after that, back in the room.
What time was this? Do you remember?
No, I would say between 6 and 7, roughly.
Thank you. And what happened to your phone? Can we look at paragraph 28, please? I remember my phone being seized. This was before I learned Sheik had died. I was in the same room I gave my statement. They said it would be very helpful for them to seize my phone. They told me it would be helpful, so I gave them it. I don't remember if they explained why it would be helpful. 29, I've always wanted to get my phone back, but I think it's a fool's errand. I've got photos and sentimental memories in it. The perk replaced the phone, but the content of the phone is what I'd like to get back. Tell us what happened about your phone.
Just that. I just recall being asked if they could have my phone. That would be helpful, and that's all it took. I was trying to be helpful. There was no reason to, put up an argument about it. I wanted to be helpful. I thought I was being, so I gave them it.
And did they explain why they wanted it?
No.
Did they say when you would get it back?
No.
And have you ever received your phone back?
No.
And you say there's sentimental memories and photos in it that you would like if
Yeah.
that was possible?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask you about the following day, please, the 4th of May? And if we look at paragraph 30, which is just at the bottom of this page, and you say you don't remember much about the 4th of May, we've heard that was a Monday. You talk about you and Kirsty hanging around for most of the day, and you were phoning to see if you could get into your house. Every time someone said we'd phone back shortly, I think I phoned 4 or 5 times before we were let back in. I kept being told we'd be allowed back in shortly. I can't remember what time it was that we got back there. I guess it was in the evening. It must have been later on in the day because I was phoning all day. Was it you that was doing the phoning rather than Kirsty?
Yes, as I recall, yeah. We may both have phoned at some point. I can remember. I think it was me.
Were you given an explanation as to why you weren't able to get in sooner in the evening?
No, as I recall, I was just told someone will get back in touch with you shortly.
Did anyone ever get back in touch with you?
No, it took me phoning as I remember, again, it's a long time ago, but as I remember, I phoned a final time, and they may have phoned back that last time. I can't remember, and gave us I really can't remember the details of the conversation. But it must have been I was evening, like I'm saying there. I can't remember the time. We were just really eager to get back to our house. I really can't remember the details of that at all.
What impact did it have on you and Kirsty not being able to get back into the house that day?
Well, you know, we were at her mum's, so it was fine. We had somewhere to be, but we were just very eager to get home to our own house. You know, we had our dog there as well, and he was eager to get home as well, obviously. I guess we just wanted to get home and be together and sort of process what was happening.
Were you upset about what had happened to your friend?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Would it have been helpful to get back into the house in terms of...
Yes.
Can we look at paragraph 31? This is where you talk about getting back to the house. You say there were 2 officers there. They said a bunch of stuff to us, but I can't remember what it was. I remember standing in the kitchen with the 2 of them in suits. Do you have any recollection at all about what those officers said to you?
I really don't. I don't at all. I think we were eager to... At this point, we were so happy to be back in our house. We knew they were going to be leaving. I don't think I was... I don't know how much I was even taking in what they were saying. I was just standing there letting them say what they had to say, and I was just eager for them to leave and for us to be back home. I really don't remember... I really struggle to remember anything that was said to me.
All right. And then paragraph 32, you say the police found what they described as herbal matter. They said they were going to take it. They didn't provide us with a search warrant, so I don't know why they came across this. Carry on a little bit further on, please. They must have looked for the herbal matter because they found it in a drawer under my bed. It wasn't laying out. I'm sure one of them said something to me on the phone. My memory was something to the effect of they've found the herbal matter and need to be seen to be doing something, so they'll seize that. That's my memory of it. Can I ask you, when we've been talking about, looking at your statement, talking about when you arrived back home in the house, and here you're talking about having a phone call.
Yes.
Can you explain to me when the phone call took place?
This was while we were at Kirsty's mum's house. One of the... would have been the final phone call before we were allowed to go back home, I guess. And it had it explained to me, again, this is... What I remember was having explained to me that the words I remember being said to me was they'd found this herbal matter and they had to be seen to be doing something, so they were going to take that. Again, I wasn't questioning anything. I was just wanting to get home. Yeah, they said they were going to take that. I don't know why.
Was anything said to you at any time about the police getting a warrant to search your house?
No.
And at any time were you asked for permission to give the police your consent to search the house?
No.
Can I ask you to look at paragraph 70, please? And here you're being referred to a statement that Kirsty gave. And it said, just after 6 p.m, I believe it was, the same officer called back and spoke to me. He said they would be able to release the house back to us, but only after they did a walk round with us. Do you remember knowing that there was going to be something called a walk round?
I don't remember, no.
Did you know what a walk round was?
I could assume.
And when you got back to the house, did you do a walk round?
I guess so. Like I said, the only memory I have of it is standing in the kitchen with them before they left, telling us something. I was not taking. I can't remember it now, and I don't remember the walk round, but it's not to say it didn't happen.
All right. Do you feel personally that you received an explanation from the officers, something that you could understand?
No.
When you got back to the house?
No.
Do you feel that you've ever had a full explanation of why things were done on the 3rd and 4th of May in relation to you and your house?
No.
Thinking back now, what is your impression about how you were treated on the 3rd and 4th of May?
Again, it's given us a sort of a I don't know, not the best view of the. I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but obviously I feel like they could have given us more information, or maybe even done something else entirely, rather than all these officers coming to see us. It doesn't seem like it was necessary or appropriate even. I feel like I'm just repeating myself, to be honest.
Not at all. Looking back now, and obviously you know more now than you did then, do you feel that you were treated fairly by the police on the 3rd of May?
No.
Why not?
Well, they could have given us more information. Again, like I said, it's clearly intimidating. I mean, they must be aware of what it's like to go into someone's house when, you know, we're just having a cup of coffee. All these people come into your house. They have to be aware of how that comes across and how that makes someone feel. Sending an officer up the stairs with us while we get changed just adds to the confusion of the situation. It felt like just give us all the information you can while we give you no information, looking back, and that's what happened. I mean, they weren't necessarily openly disrespectful to us or anything, but they just gave us nothing really, gave us nothing to go on whatsoever, just that we were going to be helping them and we should be helping them, so that's what we did, just cooperated. No, I mean, the fact that they seized their house is still a mystery to us. I don't feel like there was any need for us to be in that situation.
How do you feel you were treated on the 3rd of May?
I kind of feel, to be honest, like we were used a little bit. Yeah, I'd say that's a good way of describing it.
Can I move on to the 8th of May, paragraph 45, please? everyone was unsure and people were thinking there was more to the story by that point. PERC had a reputation as being another arm of the police, so we were much less willing to speak to them because they were using information for their means to help the police. So on the 8th of May, we've talked earlier about you giving a statement to the PERC. And we looked at that at the outset. Can I ask you, first of all, before you gave that statement to the PERC, had they been in touch with you to make arrangements about that?
I guess so. I can't remember exactly. I'm sure they were, yeah.
And you've talked here about some concerns that you had. Can you, looking at paragraph 45, can you tell us a little bit more about...
I remember, sorry.
No,
the initial statement, I don't feel like there were, I feel like again there was, as I recall, the initial statement to the park was just again really just was cooperating with them entirely. They just went through the statement I'd given to the police. There was really not much to add to it because it was such a detailed statement that I'd given. It's just again the weeks and months following it, it's hard to pinpoint exactly in time, but that we became aware, you know, as people were talking about the situation, that Park had that reputation as being ex-police officers, and we were all sort of feeling defensive at this point, I guess, about what information we were giving out, and at some point different stories were starting to come out, and you know, different versions of events were all coming out. So it was a very strange time in terms of the information that was coming out and what was true and what was not. And I guess we, as in me and Kirsty and Zahid, I guess, were probably a bit less sure of how willing we should be to continue to help Park with information. Like, we didn't know what they were going to do with information. I think that's what it was, and there was a lack of certainty that we were actually helping the situation at this point, if it was positive for us to speak to them or not. So I think we were, at some point, we grew more and more reluctant to speak with them.
You've talked about a feeling of defensiveness. What was it that was causing you to become more defensive at that time?
Due to the stories, the wildly embellished stories that were coming out, even, I mean newspaper articles and things like that, it was clear to us, and these were often, as I recall, like as I can remember, these were stories put out by like the police lawyer and things like that. They weren't just random. These were actually stories being put out there to the general public, and it was pretty clear to us what these stories, why they were being put out the way they were, focusing on Sheck being some kind of enormous, intimidating, you know, drug-fueled maniac kind of thing. Things to that effect. There was a growing feeling of us versus them, I guess, like they're trying to... I guess it became clear to us that they were trying to divert the narrative in a different direction.
Was that the impression that you had?
Yeah, that just grew and grew, I guess, from then on, yeah. That became more apparent to us.
Now, there may be one thing I just want to correct there.
Okay.
We may hear that you've said there was the police lawyer. Presumably you're not in a position to distinguish between lawyers for the police or lawyers for the Federation or lawyers for individual officers.
Absolutely. I'm just, as I recall, I just remember seeing where these stories were coming from, like who they were, who the source was, cited in the articles, and given how wildly embellished some of them seemed to be, it was shocking to see that they were coming from what would appear to be a reputable source of information, what I would expect to be, and that's what sort of fueled the, feelings of defensiveness, like there was people working against, Sheck really in this situation after he was gone.
Thank you. Against that, did you feel that there was any information coming out where it was clear to you that people were open-minded about the events, or looking at all the options and all the possibilities?
Like newspaper articles, you mean?
Yes, you've talked about the articles
Yeah, no, there
that
was.
made you feel defensive, and you
Yeah,
were
no,
shocked
there was
by.
definitely others detailing his injuries and so on. I don't think all articles in the Sun were bad. Basically, that was clearly it was the Sun that was being used to push these articles, basically.
Can I ask you, looking back now, we've obviously heard a lot of evidence from other witnesses about, we know Sheku was black, and I've asked a lot of questions about race. And I'm wondering, was there any information given to you or any questions asked of you on the 3rd of May that would indicate to you that the police were investigating whether or not the events had been racially motivated?
No, I can't remember anything about that on the 3rd of May. Can't remember. Again, it was mostly me just giving full details from one point to the end point. I don't remember being asked. I don't remember being asked about race.
Thank you. Can you give me a moment, please? Thank you very much, Mr. Dick. I don't have any further
Okay,
questions.
no problem.
Thank you.
Are there any Rule 9 applications? No. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dick, for coming and giving evidence to the inquiry. We're going to adjourn for a break now, and you'll be free to go.
Okay. Thank you.
20-minute break. Good afternoon, Mr. Bellingham. Would you, you're going to take the oath, is that right?
Yes,
Yes. Will you raise your right hand and say the words of the oath? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Ms. Graham.
Thank you. I was going to say good morning there, but it's probably good afternoon by now. No, still
about.
morning. It's Friday. You are David Bellingham,
Yes,
and you are what age, please?
38 now.
You are an inspector.
Currently, yes.
Yes. Are you planning on changing that soon?
It's the process that I'm in just now. I'm currently an inspector. I'll go back to sergeant and then I'll get promoted later in the year. So
I see.
it's.
So
Well,
is this a temporary position at the moment?
yes, it's temporary just now, and I'll get substantive later in the year, I'm told. So.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You joined the police service in 2006, is
Yes.
that right? And in 2015, you were a DC with reactive CID at Stirling.
Yes.
Can you tell me what is reactive CID?
Reactive CID is ultimately we deal with incidents that come in of a serious criminal nature or are decided by the management that reactive CID will look at. So for instance, serious violence, serious assaults, robberies, sexual crime, and in initial stages of murder inquiries. But again, it could also involve embezzlement type incidents, frauds. So basically, not the most serious, but a higher level of crime than routine day-to-day stuff.
And are you based in one place, or can you be moved around as required?
You can be moved around the division as required. In Forth Valley Division, there are 2 CID offices, so Falkirk and Stirling. I've worked in both, but depending on the shift and what's happened, you could start in Stirling and have to go to the Falkirk side to assist with an inquiry.
In 2015, how many years' service had you had?
9.
About
that would
9.
be.
Before I take you through your evidence today, do you see that there's a blue folder sitting in front of you?
Yep.
Please open it up. You'll see in there that there are some hard copies of your inquiry statement and other statements that you've given.
Yep.
Please feel free at any time if you want to refer to them, please do so. That's completely for your disposal. In addition to that, if I'm going to ask you to look at a particular paragraph in your inquiry statement, you see the screen in front of you, I'll have that put up on the screen.
Right.
If you're comfortable using a screen, you can just read it off the screen. But if you prefer the hard copy, that's available to you.
Yep.
Can we look first of all at PS 00935, which, as I understand, is a statement that you gave or prepared on the 3rd of May 2015 at 23:30 hours.
Yep.
And it was prepared at Larbert Police Office.
Yep.
And was that your operational statement or a statement that you gave to somebody?
It was an operational statement that I forwarded to I think it was the Holmes team at the time who were involved in the inquiry.
So it was a self-penned statement prepared by you late on 3rd of May 2015.
Yep.
And then passed on to
Yeah.
the relevant department or relevant officer.
Yes.
And when you prepared that statement, were you doing your best to be accurate in your recollection and honest in what you were saying?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we look now at your inquiry statement, SBPI 00208? And you'll see there that it says Inspector David Bellingham, taken by someone in the inquiry team on Thursday the 3rd of November 2022.
Yes.
And if we can look at the final page, we'll see it's 25 pages long. And on the final page, we should see a signature. The signatures are all redacted on the screen, but your hard copy will show you the signature.
Yep.
And that was dated the 30th of November 2022. And in actual fact, you've signed every page of your statement.
Yep.
Thank you. Do you see the final paragraph there, 76? I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website.
Yes.
And you understand that your statement will be published after you've given evidence today?
Yes.
That's great. And you've done your best in giving this statement to the inquiry to be honest and truthful and as accurate as you can be in your recollection.
Yes.
Let's look first of all at paragraph 12 of your inquiry statement, and I want to ask you some questions about your involvement with these events on the 3rd of May 2015. And I think what you've told us in your statement is that you'd never actually been to Kirkcaldy until that day.
No.
That was your first visit. You didn't know any of the officers there.
Yes.
And you were essentially brought into the area to help with
Yes.
the events. And in paragraph 7, you say you'd got to Kirkcaldy about 10:30 in the morning. So you'll see towards the bottom of that paragraph, I'd say I think maybe 10:30 roughly we'd have got to Kirkcaldy roundabout.
Yes.
Thank you. Tell us a little about how you first became involved in the events on the 3rd of May.
Well, that day I'd started at Stirling Police Office. I was day shift in the CID. It was just a normal start to the day, and then not long after starting the SIO for the day, I don't recall who it was. I think it was a Stirling-based officer. They came in and told me that I was to go to Kirkcaldy. There'd been an incident whereby a male had been involved in a fight or an altercation with the police and had subsequently died, and I was asked to go to assist with the inquiry, and I was to report to, I believe it was the Detective Superintendent on arrival, and I was told that another officer, Alan Monteith, who was a DC at Larbert, that's actually PPU side, it's not reactive CID, it's public protection. Me and him had been asked to go, so that was the first I was told, and I think I picked him up and we went and drove to Kirkcaldy.
And was that the first you became aware that something had happened in Kirkcaldy?
Yes.
That day? And you mentioned a detective superintendent. Do you remember his name?
No.
Was it Pat Campbell?
I don't know.
You don't remember. And so you and Monteith, your colleague, Mr. Monteith, went and arrived roughly about 10:30.
Yes.
When you arrived at Kirkcaldy, can you tell us how you were briefed and who by?
When we arrived, to the best of my recollection, we were shown to an office or a waiting area, whilst obviously others were conducting inquiries or preparing to brief us. And then I received a briefing from, I believe it was a DS Dursley, and the briefing followed on from what had been told by my SIO, that a male had been observed in the street allegedly in possession of a knife. Police had attended. There had been an altercation with the police. The male had subsequently died, and police were obviously carrying out the inquiry. I was told that Mr. Bayou had been at his friend's house, a Martyn Dick earlier in the night, and the general premise of our briefing was that we were to attend, along with other officers, to Martyn Dick's address. There was officers from, so me and Alan were the only two from Forth Valley, and there was officers from the major investigation team, I believe based from Edinburgh. So we were briefed together. The officers from the major investigation team, we were going with them. They were going to hopefully trace Martyn and his partner, I believe it was Kirsty, and ultimately obtain statements from them, inquire into their knowledge, because they'd been or believed to be with Mr. Bayou that prior to the incident with the police, and myself and Alan were asked to assist with that and ultimately just make sure that their house was secure following them being traced.
Thank you. So let's look at paragraph 9. You talk here in your statement about being given a briefing, and you describe the contents of that, and you say the mail was Sheku Bayou. When you arrived at 10:30 in the morning at Kirkcaldy,
Yep.
was part of the briefing that the man had been identified as Sheku Bayou?
Yes, yeah, I'd got given his name at the briefing, yeah, so I knew that.
And he'd passed away by then. You were
Yes.
aware that he was dead. And you were aware of the police investigation looking for Martyn Dick and his partner Kirsty to take statements.
Yes,
That was part of the strategy or the plan at that time.
yeah.
And you said to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that they had been with Sheku Bayou prior to the incident with the police. Did you have any more information about when they'd been with Sheku Bayou prior to Hayfield Road?
No, we didn't have an exact time. They'd just been with him prior to it.
And you've said in paragraph 9, Sheku Bayou had been at his friend's house, a boy, Martyn Dick, so that's line 3 of that paragraph. He'd left there. He was allegedly in possession of a knife. The police had attended a call and there'd been a struggle, a fight, and ultimately Sheku had passed away whilst engaged with the police. Can I ask you a little more about your understanding at that time? Was it your understanding that when Sheku Bayou left Martyn Dick's house, that he was in possession of a knife at that point?
No, but, sorry, my understanding was he'd left there, and then the incident with the police, he was in possession of a knife. At this point, we didn't know where the knife had come from.
So you didn't know that he'd been in possession of a knife from leaving Martyn Dick's house? That's not just the way that reads. I just wanted to be clear about that.
I can see that. No, we didn't know when he got possession of the knife, and that would probably be part of the inquiry with Martyn Dick and his partner.
Right. And thank you. And was it part of your understanding about whether Mr. Bayou had been in possession of a knife at Hayfield Road? Were you given any briefing about that? Did he have a knife at Hayfield Road?
Certainly from the briefing, that's what we're told. He was allegedly in possession of a knife there.
At the time that the police arrived?
Yeah, with his engagement with the police, he was allegedly in possession of a knife then. That's what I was told.
Thank you. The information you had about the events at Hayfield Road, did that come really from the briefing, the information you were given at the briefing?
Yes.
Did it come from any other source at all? Did you look at call cards, or we've heard called storm cards?
No, I don't have. Well, back then you didn't have access to Kirkcaldy systems. I never touched the computer that whole day there.
Can we look at paragraph 10, please? I am asked if I recall whether I was told what the source of the information that DS Dursley included in his briefing was, or where he was getting that information from, And if that was something that would typically be included in a briefing, the answer is no. With what I recall, no. I would imagine it would be that information they had gathered at that point. When you say you were asked about, was it typically included, that information in a briefing, you say the answer is no. Can you explain to me what you mean by that?
Well, generally speaking, or in that circumstance, it could be opened with the information we have at this point is, and then that's the briefing. So we don't get told we've spoke to, this officer, this member of the public, that member. We generally don't get told everybody that's been spoken to. It'll be a summarised version or a general overview of what information they have. So in a briefing, they'll not go through who's all been spoken to and told that information at that point.
So it's a summary of the up-to-date information available to the police at that time?
Yes.
So what was different about this briefing by DS Dursley to you at that time in the morning? What was different about it?
Different, how, sorry?
Well, you said it wasn't, let me just read this again, paragraph 10. I'm asked if I recall whether I was told that the source of the information that DS Dursley included in his briefing was, or where he was getting that information from, and if that was something that would typically be included in a briefing, and the answer is no. So you mean the source of the information isn't normally included in a briefing? Is that what that means?
The source of information, not always. Sometimes we will. I've had a lot of briefings over the years. Sometimes we will get that information off the source. Sometimes we won't. Sometimes we just get a summary of the circumstances.
All right, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Can we look at paragraph 12, please? I am asked if I remember any general discussion amongst colleagues in the office about what was happening, had happened, or was thought to have happened that morning. The answer is not really. It was more, to be honest, probably a degree of shock. I would say it's a terrible thing to happen. We're going to have to do everything here, everything we possibly can. I'm interested in what you mean by that. We're going to have to do everything here, everything we possibly can.
What I'm meaning by that is it's going to be a major investigation. So we're going to be carrying out all available lines of inquiry. Is ultimately what I'm meaning there. That there will be a command structure in place, an SIO leading it. They will gather all the information. It will be a major inquiry, and that's what I mean by we'll have to do everything. That we will be doing a lot of inquiries, some immediate inquiries, but some peripheral inquiries, as in the inquiry spans out. There'll be further witnesses to be traced that may not have had direct involvement. So what I mean by that is it's a significant inquiry.
Mm. We've heard some evidence from another witness that when someone dies, and particularly when someone dies after contact with the police, and particularly when that person is black, that this would be something the press would be all over, if I can put it that way. Was that obvious to you that this was going to be there'd be a lot of press interest in this?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that statement, yeah. I'd say anybody that dies in police contact, there probably would be press, yep.
And it was clear to you after you arrived and got your briefing that this would be a major investigation?
Yes.
Significant matter.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you to look at paragraph 13, please? And you were involved with an address and Martyn Dick, who
Yes.
is one of the owners of that address, or was one of the owners at that time. And you say here, a group of us were directed to attend at the boy Martyn Dick's address. He lived with his partner. You've mentioned the name Kirsty. We've heard his now wife is called Kirsty. We were asked to attend at the address, and it was myself and Alan. Is that Alan Monteith that you mentioned?
Yes.
And officers from the MIT attended at this address. We went as a group. Can I ask how many of you were there?
I don't recall a specific number. I'd say around about 8.
Right. We've heard it may have been 9, may have been 10. Would that, you'd disagree with that?
I wouldn't disagree with that, no, around about that.
Why were there so many officers sent?
My understanding of it was that due to the altercation that Mr. Bayou had with the police, and there'd been obviously a level of violence, or the information getting received was a level of violence. He'd been at this house before, and we just didn't know what we were walking or what we were going to. Was there potential for there to be further violence? I think it was more an officer safety perspective that we have to consider that there could be other persons potentially that could be violent with the police.
When you say there'd been a level of violence, what do you mean by that? Who'd been violent?
Well, the information I'd received is that Mr. Bayou had been in possession of a knife and that he'd fought with the police and he'd resisted the police. That's the information that we had been provided, and there was also the mention that potentially under the influence of some substance. So that's the premise of what we've been told.
So Mr. Bayou had been violent and involved in an altercation with police officers.
Yes.
But you were aware that Mr. Bayou had passed away.
Yes.
Was any information given to you to suggest that Martyn Dick was involved in some way with that violence?
No, at that stage it was unknown.
And when you say unknown, what do you mean by that? Was there any suggestion he was at Hayfield Road?
No.
No. And so in what way was it unknown whether Martyn Dick had been involved in that violence?
It was unknown if there was a potential for violence on us attending that address, because of the nature of the incident with Mr. Bayou, and it was a precaution to have more officers in case we were going to something that could be dangerous.
What information had you been given to suggest that there may have been violence on the part of Martyn Dick?
No information.
You had no information that he may be violent?
No.
When you have no information that someone may be violent, is it customary to send so many officers if the situation is unknown?
I'd say no, not in general circumstances. No, you'd maybe send 2 crews to certain things, but no. But again, we didn't know as well how many people were going to be in that house. We knew obviously potentially for Martyn and his partner, but if there had been other persons, that could also be a factor of we need to speak to all these people as witnesses. So again, that could be a secondary factor of why more people are going, because obviously we've got 2 people within the house, so there's 4 officers, 2 per person to obtain the statement and corroborate it, and then 2 for securing the house. So there's a minimum of 6, but potentially because there could be others as well.
Just let me ask you a few more questions about this.
Yep.
What information, if any, did you have that Kirsty, Mr. Dick's wife, now wife, might have been violent?
None.
Nothing at all?
No.
And you mentioned 2 crews might be sent in certain circumstances. Tell me what a crew is.
So a crew in general is 2 officers, so they two officers within a vehicle or 2 officers working together, so the corroboration.
And what are the circumstances where the police may send 2 crews to a house?
Can be a number of situations. One, if the person's known to be violent towards the police. 2, if we know there's going to be a a house full of people, or we suspect there could be a house full of people. The nature of the inquiry could also dictate that we need to send, as in sometimes we've had instances of domestic violence where there's a male and female in the house, and we're sending two crews. One will speak to the female, one will deal with the male. So
You didn't have any information to suggest there was domestic violence?
no,
going on in the house?
I'm just giving you a,
Just these
a
are just
circumstance of,
examples.
of why there could be more.
So, you've talked about 8 officers going on that day. So would that be 4 crews then?
Yes.
And what was it about the circumstances that you knew in relation to Martyn Dick's house that would cause 4 crews to be sent?
As I say, I think it was twofold. We didn't know what we were going to. We didn't know what had caused Mr. Bayou to act or be involved in the way he was with the police. So it was unknown what had caused him to react that way with the police. So it was an officer safety perspective that could there be other persons that would react that way. We didn't have information that they would, but we just didn't know. Also, we were there to trace 2 witnesses. There could have been more. So potentially to cover that as well. And obviously we're hoping to secure the house for further inquiry as well.
And in terms of your own experience in reactive CID or in any of your experience, how many occasions have you been involved where the situation's unknown, you're looking for 2 individuals to take statements of, and you send 4 crews?
Over the years I've had several different experiences of sending more crews.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I have had several different experiences of sending, more than 2 crews.
And tell me about those experiences. When are 4 crews normally sent out?
I wouldn't say they're normally sent out. It's not a specific 4 crews. I'd say sometimes we get a group of officers because it could be a case of we don't know who's going to be in. There is potentially a history of violence. We're hoping to secure a locus. There's potentially controlled drugs or evidence within a locus. Public reassurance as well at times, and officer safety perspective. So there numerous different factors can cause us to send more officers.
You said earlier, a moment ago, you would send 2 crews if a person was known to be violent. So a person in the house that you're looking for was known to be violent. But I'm just trying to understand, you didn't have any information to suggest that Martyn Dick or his now wife Kirsty were violent.
No.
But I'm trying to work out why 4 crews would be sent to speak to Martyn Dick and Kirsty MacLeod as she was then. I'm trying to work out why 4 crews would be sent in that unknown situation.
It was obviously direction from a senior officer. As I say, my perception of it or interpretation of it at the time was we're going to speak to 2 witnesses. We're going to ask them to be attending at the police office, so that will need 2 officers for each person. We're looking to secure the locus, which is another 2 officers, so it takes us up to 6. Plus, it's unknown. Basically, it's a fluid situation. There has been violence shown to the police by Mr. Bayou, and my interpretation was that they were cautious that could there be other people, could it be a case of they were under the influence of substances, that when on seeing the police they would react. So my interpretation was it was an officer safety perspective. We didn't know what we were going to. It was a fluid situation that we were reacting to, and we had several lines of inquiry to complete when we were there.
So a cautious approach was being taken in light of protecting officer safety.
Yes.
And You've talked about someone else making the decision. Would that have been a senior officer of some description?
Yes, I mean, ultimately we were given the briefing and that's what we were told to do. So
Do you know who would have been responsible for making that decision to send 4 crews?
I'd probably say the SIO at the time.
All right, thank you. Can I ask you, when you got to the house, we've already heard that Martyn Dick and his now wife were present that day. Did it appear to you at that time that they were potentially violent or threatening in any way?
No, at all.
So, of any of the concerns that the possible concerns you've mentioned, did it appear that they were the reality in the Dick house that day?
No, they were engaging with us, they were compliant. No, there was no issues.
Why did all of the officers go into the house if you felt that they seemed like a compliant couple?
I'd probably say that when they answer the door, we asked to come in and we need to make sure there's no other persons within the house. So I'd say that's why we were going, or why everybody went into the house, to make sure there was no other persons within. So if they've answered the door, and we can see if it's, I can't recall who answered the door, but if one's answered the door, we need to make sure there's no other persons within. So it's just really to contain the situation, to control it. I would say that's why the officers have entered.
Was there a concern on your part that there was someone else in the house?
We didn't know if there was somebody else in.
And why would that have been of concern to you?
I'm not saying if it would be of concern, it would be we just had to control that person as well because they were potentially witnesses in the inquiry.
When you use the word control,
Yep.
can you explain what that means? Because it may mean something different for a police officer like yourself, and the public will be listening to this.
Generally, it means that they're in our presence, that they're not allowed to, go into other rooms unsupervised. That we have control of the scene, if you like. That they're in our presence, and they're engaging with us, and we can assess there's no violence or there's not going to be as well.
You've not got a warrant at this stage.
No.
And I think you've already said you were looking for witness statements. Was that on a voluntary basis?
Yes, that was my understanding, yeah.
So you would be seeking the consent or the good graces of Martyn Dick and his now wife
Yep.
to give you those witness statements.
Mm-hmm.
Could you have forced them to give you those statements?
No.
So you were relying on their willingness to engage with you and help you.
Yeah.
Why was it that you didn't want people such as Martyn Dick and his wife to go into rooms unsupervised? What was your concern?
The general premise was that we didn't know if Mr. Bayou had been under the influence of any substances, and there's potential that there were substances within that address. We just didn't know. So it was to control it in case through our inquiry we established that there was something. It was also, we didn't know if there'd been anything had occurred within that house prior to his engagement with the police. If there had been an altercation, a disturbance, which again might, as the inquiry progresses, provide evidence of the whole circumstance. It was just we didn't know.
So you didn't know if there were any substances in the address that may have been consumed by Mr. Bayou?
Yes.
Was there any information available to you at that time that there were relevant substances in that address that had caused some issue with Mr. Bayou?
No, we didn't have that.
What would have been wrong with Mr. Dick or his wife going into a room unsupervised?
As I say, we didn't know what had happened at that address or what the content of that address had been. If they were unsupervised and the police had attended, they could have disposed of anything. They could have disposed of evidence relating to the inquiry.
And what would your authority have been to stop Mr. Dick or his now wife from walking around their house or going into another room unsupervised?
We wouldn't use authority. It'd be engagement with them in communication, and I think that's what we did from the outset.
Did you give an explanation to Mr. Dick and his wife about why these officers had arrived and why they were wanting into the house?
Yes, I believe, certainly from my recollection, it was given. Not me direct, as I say, I was there to support and make sure the locus was secure. Other officers were engaging with them, but certainly from my recollection, we told them why we were there.
Which officer or officers gave them the explanation?
Well, it was officers from the MIT that were to engage with them and obtain statements from them, so I believe it was MIT officers. I don't recall names.
And just for people listening, that the MIT, as you call them, or the MIT, are the major investigation team.
Yes.
Do you remember the names of any of the officers who gave an explanation?
No.
But were you in the room when the explanation was given?
Yes.
What explanation was given?
From what I recall, they were informed that there'd been an incident with the police and Mr. Bayou. We were aware that he had been at their address prior to the incident with the police, and we needed to establish the facts of his movement, and we needed to speak to them regarding it to clarify the circumstances.
Was any information given to Mr. Dick that Mr. Bayou had died?
I don't recall.
Was there any reason not to tell him that?
I don't believe there would be a reason unless the next of kin hadn't been notified at that stage, but I don't know. I certainly wasn't talking to Mr. Dick about that.
Were you aware from your role in the house that day what information was to be given to Mr. Dick?
No.
Or what information wasn't to be given to him?
No, I don't know. No.
You don't know. We've heard from Mr. Dick that he found the experience extremely intimidating. Do you have any sympathy for that view, that he's talked about being shocked so many officers were in his house?
Mm. Yeah, I can understand that with the full circumstance. Officers having to attend at your address it can be an intimidating experience, particularly if there's a number of officers. So yeah, I can sympathise with that. I can understand it.
Once you saw Mr. Dick and his wife and spoke to them, realised that many of the possible concerns that you had weren't actually the case, that they didn't appear violent, they were engaging with you, they weren't under the influence.
Yeah.
Was there any reason why some of the officers couldn't have left the property?
Yeah, they could have done. Certainly, I was there to make sure that once they'd left, it was secure. I don't know if other officers did leave. I don't recall, but certainly, once it was under control, they could leave.
And who was it that asked Mr. Dick and his wife to give statements? Do you remember?
Again, I believe it was officers from the MIT.
Mm-hmm. And you said that your role primarily was to secure the house.
Yes.
And on what basis were you going to what authority were you going to seek to secure the house?
The SIO had instructed that we secure the house because Mr. Bayou had been there earlier in the night. We hadn't established the full circumstances of his movements and what had ultimately occurred. It was still ongoing, so the premise was we were to secure that house as a potential locus till we established the full facts.
And when you say the SIO instructed, was that an instruction that you received direct from the SIO or through someone else?
That would be through the briefing, so I think it was DS Dursley that had said, Alan and David, if you secure the house.
Were you given any explanation as to the rationale or the reasoning behind securing the house, or was that an instruction that was simply given?
I believe it was an instruction, and certainly thinking on what the rationale was, it was a case of he had been in that house, we've not established the full circumstances, so until we know, we'll secure that house until we establish more facts. That's the premise that I was.
Can you help me with something? Why were you not able to have statements taken while Mr. Dick and his now wife were in their own home?
Certainly with a lot of serious inquiries I've dealt with, often witnesses will be asked to come to the police station to provide statements. Certainly my understanding with this incident was it was a fluid ongoing inquiry. The evidence that they could give could identify immediate lines of inquiry that needed expedited, and it allows for immediate contact with the SIO and the management at the office. So it's a controlled environment just to obtain the statement.
Is it easier for the police to take a witness statement within that controlled environment, as you say?
I wouldn't say it's easier to take a statement. We're writing a statement. We can obtain a statement anywhere. I have obtained the statements anywhere. It's just controlled for the progress of the inquiry.
And again, when you use the word control in relation to the inquiry, what is it that you mean by that? In what way is it controlled?
Ultimately, that they're in our presence, and we've got the control where we can go in and speak to our bosses. Not control of a person, controlled as in organisation.
So it makes it easier for you to speak to one of your bosses, one of your senior officers, if you're in the police office?
Yes, and they can come to us as well if they get more information that we're not aware of. Could you ask this question? Could you contain that?
Is that easier than just sharing information over the radio?
I suppose it could be done over the radio.
Can you think of any reason on that day why that couldn't have been done over the radio as you sat in Mr. Dick's house and took his statement?
Obviously the direction was to secure the house as well, so securing the house is to remove everybody from the house, so we then weren't able to take the statements, or the officers weren't able to take the statements in the house, so police office is the option that they obviously decided to go to.
Was any indication given to Mr. Dick and his now wife when they left the house about how long it would take to take their statement?
I didn't speak to them regarding that.
Can we look at paragraph 27, please? So I'm asked why the police would need to take statements from Martyn Dick and Kirsty MacLeod. The answer is, as far as we're aware, they were in contact with him shortly before the incident happened with the police. That was information given to you at the briefing, was it?
Yeah, they'd had contact before that.
When you say they are shortly before the incident happened with the police, do you have any recollection of how long they were in contact with Mr. Bayou before the incident with the police?
No, I don't know. The word shortly there I probably shouldn't have said that word shortly, but
All right.
before it.
So you're not sure how long it was?
No, I'm not sure of timescales.
So if you weren't sure it was shortly before the incident, explain how it was that you thought there was any connection at all
Any connection of
between Martyn Dick, his house, and the events at Hayfield Road?
ultimately, what I was aware of was he'd been in their company before the incident at Hayfield Road. I think at the time there was mention of boxing, which I think from my recollection boxing was in the early hours of the morning.
We've heard that from other witnesses that
Right.
there was a big boxing match
uh,
in the early hours on the Sunday
mm,
from someone in America was
Right.
boxing. So although you've used the word shortly there, do you want to substitute that for something else, or are you
I'd
happy
just
to
say they were in contact with him before the incident.
Okay. And you've described, we see at the bottom of the screen, their key witnesses, that's Martyn Dick and his now wife. They've not been there at the time, but they're still a key witness to the whole circumstance and the build up to it, I would say. And was that your understanding at the time?
Yes.
What, you've talked about the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Could you help us understand what it was you were investigating at the time?
A death, I
Mhm.
would say.
And did you have in mind a number of different hypotheses about what could have caused that death?
I didn't have any hypotheses. I was just there, directed to do a role, so I performed the role. That wasn't my role to consider different factors. I was just there to perform what was tasked.
Did that make it difficult for you to work out if what you were doing was relevant or important to the investigation?
No, I think the briefing I got, I understood the circumstances of what I was then tasked to do.
Okay. Can I ask you to look at paragraph 15 of your inquiry statement, please? And here you were asked to look at your initial statement, and which said, as part of the initial briefing, and then the second sentence said, information was later provided that the address of Martyn Dick was, and you were given it.
Yep.
I'm asked if I remember who provided that information. The answer is no. I couldn't say. And obviously there were people involved, and I think they were doing inquiries into it, and we were the sort of, I don't know how to describe it, we were the sit and wait squad. I'm interested in that phrase. We've not heard that before.
I've never used that phrase before in my life either.
Do you? I'm hoping you understand it though.
Yeah, ultimately what it was, we were getting asked to go to Martyn Dick's address, but they hadn't confirmed the address at that stage. So we were sitting and waiting. We're not the sit and wait squad, but we were sitting and waiting until that address was established.
And then you could go and carry the
Yes.
out the task. Did you know anything at all at that stage about PERC becoming involved?
I didn't know, but from my police experience, there had been a death with police contact. I'd have been off the belief that PERC would be involved, or certainly would have been notified.
Did you have an understanding at that time whether your instructions were coming from the police or through PERC?
I believed it was the police, but I don't know. I didn't have any contact with the PERC of that either.
So you'd never had any direct contact with anyone from PERC at that time?
No.
Had you been involved at that time or prior to the 3rd of May with any incidents or events where PERC were involved?
Not that I recall, no.
Did you have any sense on the 3rd of May as to the urgency or otherwise of your seizing the house of Martyn Dick?
I believe that the SIO or the management had made the decision for it to be done, and we were tasked to doing it. So I think generally an urgency to it because they were trying to gather all the evidence and contain it. So certainly me going there and that being my task, I'd say that was, for them, it was probably was urgent.
When you seized the house, were you involved in taking Martyn Dick or his now wife to Kirkcaldy, or did you remain with the house?
I remained outside the house.
If you look at paragraph 17, please. I'm asked what my understanding was as to the basis on which Martyn Dick and Kirsty MacLeod's home was being seized and searched, and what my understanding was of what we were potentially expecting to find. I'm wondering if you can explain to people listening what's the difference between seizing a house and searching a house?
Seizing a house is taking control of it, as in making sure that all persons within are out with the house, and securing it, as in making sure the doors are locked, the windows are secure, or we've got control of it. So to make sure it's empty and there's nobody getting in, that would be seizing it.
And it may be obvious, but can you just explain how that differs from searching a house?
Searching a house is entering the house and ultimately searching through it, searching rooms, drawers, cupboards, loft spaces, actually going through everything. And
Was that part of your role that day?
no, I wasn't searching.
Do you know, you'd obviously be instructed to attend the Dick's house. Do you know what your authority was to search that house?
We weren't, well, certainly I wasn't searching the house. We were to seize it, and so.
Were you party to any discussion or decisions about not just seizing the house then, but actually searching inside the house?
No, it was, hopefully Martyn and Kirsty will come to the police office, we'll seize the house, and then it would be for the SIO or whoever takes the lead to then make a decision on that.
So that's a decision for the SIO,
Yes,
whether to search a house?
Yeah.
And whose decision, or who would make an assessment of whether there is legal authority to search a house?
Again, the SIO would lead on that, I would say.
Thank you. If there's a warrant, however, is that something you'd be provided with if you were being asked to go to a house and seize it, or seize it and search it?
Yes, in order to search a house, if there's a warrant for a house, those going to the house will be in possession of the warrant. And generally speaking, through my history, each officer will see the warrant and read the warrant before searching.
And show it to the occupiers
Yes,
if they're there. Going back to paragraph 17, we're talking about seizing and searching, and you were asked about what your understanding was of what we were potentially expected to find. My understanding, thinking back of it at the time, would be that Sheku Bio had been in attendance. We couldn't rule out that controlled drugs or substances had been involved in it. We had confirmed he was at that address. And how did you confirm that Mr. Bio had been at that address? Do you know?
I don't know.
You don't know. So potential drugs or that in that house. So we would seize it in consideration for a warrant, and that's what I potentially take it as. And can I ask you to explain that sentence? we would seize it in consideration for a warrant. And that's what I potentially take it as. You've told us you didn't turn up with a warrant.
Yep.
So can you explain consideration for a warrant?
So what I would say is it's a potentially a secondary locus to the incident. So we are seizing that house at this time for potential consideration of obtaining a warrant to search that address. Or potentially search it under a warrant, but there's also consent from the owner as well. There's other ways.
So you seized the house with consent from Martyn Dick on that day, is that right?
Well, I would say we seized the house and we informed Martyn of we're seizing it as part of the inquiry.
So you didn't ask for his consent in advance?
I wasn't speaking to him about that, so certainly I didn't ask him that question myself, no.
Did you hear someone else asking for his consent or his permission?
No, not that I recall.
We can look into that. And was it your view then that there'd be consideration given to seeking a warrant to search the house?
Yeah, I consider that a potential, yes.
I mean, did you ask Martyn Dick if the house could be searched?
I didn't. No, I wasn't asked.
Did you hear anyone asking Martyn Dick or Kirsty MacLeod if the house could be searched?
No, not at the time I was in the house, no.
Was there any other grounds that you're aware of that would permit police to search a house? You've told us about consent, you've told us about a warrant. Are there any other circumstances that you're aware of that would have permitted the police to search the house that day on the 3rd of May? As far as you know?
As far as I know, I am aware that there have been times previously that, as a matter of urgency, there is a need to immediately search a premises, potentially to secure evidence or prevent evidence from being lost. Again, that probably be a direction from a senior officer, an SIO. But I'm aware that in certain circumstances, as a matter of urgency.
Was there anything that you were aware of personally that would have given you rise to recognise a sense of urgency in relation to searching Martyn Dick's and Kirsty MacLeod's house?
Not that I was privy to or aware of, no.
And you think that would have been something the SIO would have been involved in, assessing whether there were circumstances that would have merited that?
Yeah, I'd consider that, yeah.
It merited it in the absence of a warrant or consent?
Yeah.
So we can maybe speak to the SIO about that to find out more about that. That'd be fair.
Yeah.
And then looking back again at paragraph 17, so we said, so we would seize it in consideration for a warrant, and that's what I potentially take it as. It was a place he was before. Is that a reference to a place where Mr. Bio had been before?
Yes.
Thinking on it now, that would be my consideration, that was potentially an instruction that because there was the possibility of controlled drugs or substances being involved and he subsequently died, that there's potential in that house that there could be something illicit or all sorts. That would certainly be my working kind of assessment just now. That's why we would seize it. Can I just ask you a little bit more about that? Mm-hmm. Was this your understanding at the time, or is this you thinking back now and thinking that's what the position may have been?
That's my thinking back when I was obviously interviewed. That was my thinking on it.
Interviewed by the inquiry?
Yes, aye. That was what I'm thinking.
So at the time, in May of 2015, was there any information that you had or anything within the house that would have made you think there were controlled drugs or substances involved and that had caused Mr. Bio to die?
No, not that I was, not that I'd observed in the house.
Right, thank you. Can I ask you if you were in the house in relation to when clothes were recovered from Mr. Dick and Miss MacLeod? Can we look at paragraph 28, please? And this is your inquiry statement. And you've been referred by the inquiry team to a statement given by Kirsty MacLeod. And she says, at this time, so this is in the house, I was still wearing the clothes I had on when Sheck was in the house. I was asked if I could go and get changed, and before I went upstairs, they told me to leave out the clothes I'd been wearing. They explained this by saying they might have to rule out my DNA from Sheck, as I had earlier told them that I had cuddled Sheck when he arrived at the house that morning. Can I ask why were the police seeking to recover the clothing of Kirsty MacLeod that day?
My understanding of it is that we didn't know the full circumstances that had led up to Mr. Bayou being in his engagement with the police. We were still trying to establish that what had happened before then, had he been involved in anything else. We didn't know what had happened. So with regards to Kirsty MacLeod, she had been in contact with Mr. Bayou before his contact with the police. So, as I say, I think they're recovering all the evidence they can, or every connection they can just now until they establish the full facts.
Can you explain why the clothing of Kirsty MacLeod might assist the investigation that was going on?
The clothing of Kirsty, obviously, she'd been in contact with Mr. Bayou before his engagement with the police. We don't know what happened with Mr. Bayou before his engagement with the police. So for example, if he'd been involved in an altercation with somebody else, a fight or something, I'm not saying he is, I'm just thinking a hypothesis here, and he'd been injured, his blood potentially could be on Kirsty MacLeod's clothing, and it's just part of the investigation to establish that. I'm taking that as a potential, a consideration now that you're asking me.
Well, I'm conscious of the time. Maybe that would be
We'll stop for lunch and sit at 2 o'clock.
a microphone.